All right, so let's go ahead and talk about dividends. You guys know that I love dividends. We're going to be looking at the payout ratio, which is basically an expression of how much of a company's earnings are they using to pay dividends. So we're going to go through a few examples and more importantly, how you can do this yourself to find out, is the dividend sustainable for this company? So let's go ahead and get into that now. And before we get into a couple of examples, let's go ahead and go over the payout ratio. So again, it's just looking at the proportion of earnings that a company pays its shareholders in the form of dividends. And they're looking at, okay, here's how much the company earns and here's how much they pay in dividends, right? So a high percentage means that they're using a lot of their earnings to shell out and pay for the dividend. So intuitively, it makes sense that if they have a low payout ratio, that means that they have a lot of extra money to potentially raise and sustain their dividends. So let's go ahead and look at a few examples. All right, so I'm over here on Yahoo Finance, and you can basically put any stock in here, and then you go to this little area called statistics, right? Now, again, as we talk about payout ratios, it's looking at how much of a company's earnings are they using to actually pay for the dividend. So the lower the percent is going to be the strongest, but there's a couple of caveats that we're going to go through as well. So I'm going to keep coming down, and here we are, we're at payout ratio. So typically below 50% is usually healthy. That means that the company can probably sustain its dividend. So if it gets above 50%, you kind of want to inspect the company a little bit more. So with Home Depot, it's below 50%. And usually you want to look for companies that are a lot lower than say 50%, but Home Depot is one of those examples where they have just such a long history of paying out dividends that, you can give them a free pass. Well, nothing is a free pass, but you know what I mean. Let's look at another example. So Home Depot I've owned for years, right? It's a great dividend name. Let's look at Microsoft, right? It's another name. I've owned this one for a number of years. But let's look at its payout ratio. Right here, 25%. Okay, that is very healthy, right? That means they have enough earnings. If they were to fall on bad times, are they really at risk of cutting their dividend? At 24%, probably not. So it's a good company. Let's look at some other examples where, sometimes the percentages you kind of got to walk through and you got to think about it logically. We're looking at Walmart here, right? I've owned Walmart for a number of years, a great one. Look at this, their payout ratio is 76%. Now, some people might look at that and be like, oh man, that's a high percent that they're paying out of their earnings, but keep in mind, it's Walmart, right? Walmart has a rich history of paying their dividend, raising their dividend. They just raised it today. So listen, I don't see them as risky. Whereas let's say you go to an energy space, right? So you look at BP, it's another company that I own. They're very levered to the price of crude oil, right? So if oil goes down, they're going to be stuck with, having to come up with money to pay their dividend. So above 57% tells you that, listen, it tends to be relatively high for energy companies. You can see that BP is paying out a decent percent of their earnings to cover that dividend. But again, it's also BP, right? They have a rich history of paying out their dividends. So the point of the dividend ratio, the payout ratio, is you want to really just look at how strong the company is, right? You look at a company like NVIDIA, okay? They don't have a huge dividend and they make so much money. Their payout ratio is only 5%. So listen, these are some of the things that you want to be thinking about when it comes to looking for dividend growth stocks. So you want to be focused on a couple of things. One, the lower the payout ratio, the better, right? So below 50% is usually pretty healthy, but also keep in context that if there is a company with a rich history, years, decades of paying out dividends, raising their dividends, chances are they know how to manage their earnings and their cash flows, and they'll probably be all right. All right, and that's your lesson for today. You want to be looking at that payout ratio, but you also have to consider what stock you're looking at, right? A lot of riskier companies out there that don't have a big history of paying out a dividend. If that payout ratio gets really, really high, that could be a red flag. But some of the stocks that I'm showing you, there are different cases for different stocks. Just remember, always focus on quality, and in the end, you will most likely win at investing. I'll see you guys next time.